sitting where I was told to sit. Imagine that. So fun. Take some videos. Oh. Good evening. My name is Derek Noble. Thank you for coming to Room 149. My background, I come from a fitness background, and I walked in here probably two months ago, and I was just the wow factor in regards to this technology. Fitness and technology have come together. I'm a triathlete. I've run marathons, half marathons. I was trying to qualify for the Ironman, but then I tore my neck muscles and decided it wasn't for me. But I'm back in, and I have Stuart here, so I think he's going to coach me to get back into the sports and compete on and get to the finish line again and be in a healthy state. But Sid Rahman is the CEO and founder of Rome 149. He is a scientist, a madman scientist. He's created this technology and brought the whole vision here at Rome 149. So I'd like to introduce Sid Rahman.
Thank you, Derek. Welcome, everybody. And again, thank you, Stuart, for inviting a lot of your friends and people that you've coached over the years. I'm in August company, and every time I meet all of you and some of the people Stuart and Derek introduced me to, I feel like I'm in Alice in Wonderland, and in a good way, because 2-3 years ago, I could have never, pictured myself being part of such a wonderful community. I've always been a runner all my life, and my best years were many, many decades ago. However, I've loved the sport, and within my own limited abilities, I've learned how to enjoy it. So some years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, I started trail running. Didn't really like road running, and trail running was just a cup of tea for me because it gave me a chance to enjoy the woods and exploring and running into trails that were barely kept. And many a shin injury later, I still love it. However, my wife realized that some days I couldn't get out to do my trail runs in time to come in before dusk, and she bought me a treadmill. And that was I'd say about 5 years ago. And it was a good treadmill. And I tried to use that as a substitute to trail run, when I couldn't get out. And the one thing that the treadmill always disappointed me was that it couldn't replicate any of the terrains that I love to enjoy. And secondly, it was very boring. It had a small screen. If I put a TV, well, then I was watching TV, not running. So I couldn't get myself to really enjoying it as a substitute for trail running. So now that was something that I had put off to the side and said, okay, this is the way things are. Well, my other role in life is I'm an engineer, and I was doing robotics, and we were building construction-related robots, which was the situation at the beginning of the pandemic. We had completed one prototype that does painting. We were working on another prototype that hangs sheetrock. So around that time, the pandemic comes along, and I have a business partner, and we were wondering what to do because it looked like the pandemic was of unknown duration. I had a lot of engineers on payroll doing this work, and we didn't know whether we should continue because even if you build something like that, the logistics of getting parts, getting it to market were formidable. So at that point, I told my partner, well, there is this thing called the PPP, which the government is allowing companies to keep their employees for a period of, I think it was 10 weeks. I said, during this time, I'm going to pause the robots. There's something I want to try out, which is to make a more reactive treadmill. And if you met my partner, he is not much into athletics. Being poker player, he'll drink you under the table, but not an athlete. And he looked at me and he said, "What the hell? I mean, what do you know about treadmills? Why do you want to build this? And I'll support you, but leave me out of it, you know?" I said, "Okay, well, you know, we've been together for over 30 years as business partners, and I appreciated the fact that he thought this was a crazy idea." But I said, I really think there's something here that I can do. And of course, Peloton stocks were going through the roof back then. So I said, there's another market that in the pandemic seems to be rising. So maybe we can hitch a ride on that market. So July 5th, 2020 is the day we officially started this project, which is now, ensconced in Room 149. The name of the treadmill, incidentally, is The Experience. It's spelled XPRIENCE. So the Experience treadmill was born as a simple wish to my engineers. Can we build something that firstly reacts to the terrain quickly, accurately, and then the other requests that we made of our team were, can we make it immersive so that you feel like you're actually in the scene to the extent possible? And lastly, we keep it a very minimalistic type of a design so that, again, you don't have a big console staring at you and, you feel like you're running outside. So these were the parameters that we sought out to accomplish. Luckily for me and the talent of the engineers that were working with me, all of whom are still with us and in our offices in Belleville, and a couple of them are remote. We established within about 8 or 10 weeks that we were onto something. And again, having the robotics background helped us a lot. So as we moved through the months thereafter and into 2021, we were very encouraged that we brought in gaming engineers so that the scenes that we are now, showing you today are built on a game engine. And when you build something on a game engine, you get a lot of possibilities. So, for example, we're using a camera, and the camera detects your movements, and that avatar will be able to interact with the environment. So we have interactions like pushing, pulling, jumping, etc., that we have planned for the project. But in the initial form around May of last year, I said, okay, we have a product, how do we bring to market? So after a lot of vacillation about whether we go to another big company or do we try to launch it ourselves, I decided that maybe we should try to launch it ourselves. It was a tough call, an expensive call, but I decided that it might be the best for us to curate the product, for a little longer and let it maturate before we try to do anything else with it. So coming to Chelsea was the next step. I live in New Jersey, our factory is in New Jersey, but if you're going to do it, I figured let's do it in Manhattan. And this location used to be a kickboxing studio, so it served the purpose of putting enough machines. And then the idea was to, serve runners, hikers, walkers, but also to have a full service gym so that they can do other things like stretching and strength training. So that's how we ended up starting Roam 149. Much to my delight, soon after we got the physical structure built and got all the equipment in, I had the good fortune of meeting Derek. And actually, Derek was, as he said, very interested in what we had created. And he has a tremendous background in various things, including yoga. And he does a sound yoga healing class that we have juxtaposed with some of the technology of walking or hiking up to a temple. So here we have in Rome 149 old school, old traditions meeting new technology. So I'm very happy that all of you are here to experience firsthand what we've tried to do. And like I said, we are eager to have your impressions and your suggestions on what we've done right and what we could do better. So the last stage of what we are now attempting is to make this a first class running studio. And Stuart joined us about 3 weeks ago. So he's also a new entrant to Rome 149, but he's made a tremendous impact already, as evidenced by a full room. And he has looked at the product we've put together. He's made some very valuable suggestions that we are currently trying to implement. The machine was always intended for recreational runners and people like myself that just like to kind of mix it around. But with his coming on board, there's a more serious purpose to what the machine can be. And for that, I'm really looking forward for this collaboration to go much further. So, with no further ado, Stuart.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I was brought in here by probably the fastest runner in the room, or in most rooms in New York. That would be Roberto Mange over there. He was an Olympic 1500 meter runner, so I've had some cred right away. But when I realized it was about VR and gaming, I kind of thought maybe that's more for my son, but not so much for me. I'm old school. I run on the track, I run cross country, whatever. But when Roberto brought me in here, my conversion was very quick, because one of the first things that happened was I just got on the darn thing, and Sid put me on a very difficult course. That course made me run, I think, a steeper uphill than I've ever run on a treadmill. It also let me run downhill on a treadmill. And funny enough, although that may be not what most people think of as important, that really made a bell go off to me. Because probably half the people in the room or more have heard me say, how do you train for a downhill race like, say, Boston, or the Fifth Avenue Mile, which has significant downhills in them, that you can't go run on. You can't, unless you take a field trip, you can't go to Boston, and where else you find 13 miles of downhill. You can't run in the middle of Fifth Avenue, except maybe at 3 in the morning. Sidewalks aren't too good to run on, so where do you train for that? How do you know how fast to go out on that quarter mile down? Who here has run Fifth Avenue? Who's going to run coming up? Who can train on it? Who's ever run that course, unless it's in the race itself? Here's your chance. This has now been programmed to exactly replicate the course of the Fifth Avenue Mile. So you can come in here once every 2 weeks, building up to that race, and run a time trial on the course. Literally, the same gradients, and to see what that first quarter should be paced at. Things like that are going to be very valuable to very serious runners, very hardcore competitive runners. But the other aspect that got to me right away was how fun it is. And Sid's goal of recreating the outside, it's very close to true. When I was running up to the temple that he talked about, and Roseanne, where is she? That darn, there she is. Roseanne put me on a thing called free run. That means if I stick out my arm, I turn. Stick out this arm, I turn that way. You'll get to try it out. It's quite fun. Also, she kept telling me I was going the wrong way. I was going into the lava. Don't go there. Go up that hill there. Oh, it's 18% grade. Oh, this is fun. I'm trudging away trying to get to this darn temple. And I realize I'm soaked in sweat. I'm running really, really hard. And it's a blast. So at that point, I was completely convinced it's done some things that you cannot do outside. And I thought that was the key. Treadmills. Some people like it. Jonathan King and I both have liked running on regular old treadmills for the competitive aspect, raising the speed, raising the gradient. But I never thought of it as something where you could go and do things you could not do outside. Like go and train for Boston. Or run an endless variation of, whatever course you like on the moon, which you'll get to see, or underwater. There's a lot of fun things that we do on it, but they are real workouts. That was the thing to me. It's not just gaming, it's not just fun, it's also a real serious workout. That if it was icy outside, we could do anything we wanted to, and we may. The other aspect that's really fun, Sid's going to talk about, you're going to talk about the multiplayer?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I haven't done this yet, but something that I saw being done just a little while ago that they're perfecting is having several people on several treadmills, and you can see all of their avatars on each treadmill. So as you're running, you're racing your friends, or you're trying to climb a hill before them, or you're getting in their way, all kinds of things. And it looked like a very interesting kind of running workout. So, Sid, you want to describe what that was like and show it?
Well, we're gonna do it.
We're gonna-
Yeah.
You want
After
to do
you
Jonathan
finish,
first?
yeah, yes.
Okay, so I brought it here today to have a guest, our first guest in our runner series, running, guest coach basically and runner series, Jonathan Kane, who I've known for decades, and who once humiliated me in a duathlon. I guess it was a triathlon, specifically a triathlon that was a run, bike, row triathlon, in which Jonathan brought out of the back of his car a wind trainer, got on it, and prepared for the triathlon in the parking lot by riding his bike. I thought, okay, this guy's a serious cyclist.
No, you thought this guy's a jerk. But
It looked like a little overkill for the sprint couples relay, but they did win, so I can't really fault him. Anyway, yeah, we got very competitive in that relay. I could outrun him, he could outride me. We ended up both on Central Park track load. I believe I coached you to a pretty decent mile at one point.
And you were always very supportive of
Yes.
me, and I learned a lot about it.
Yeah. And what I've now found out about Jonathan is he's tended toward triathlon himself as a coach, and he's now the head coach of NYC, City Coach NYC. His wife happens to be one of the best triathletes in the city, and he coaches a lot of them, including pros. And I know he likes things like Swift, which is bicycling, virtual bicycling, where you can ride against people. I thought, parallel to that, for top level triathletes, could very well be a thing like this. And triathletes love top, cutting edge tech, and they always have the best bikes, and they always have swimming coaches. Where do they go for their running? Usually not very specific, high-end stuff like this. So I'd like Jonathan, who's now tried out the treadmill, to have a little Q&A with me about what he sees as the value for people like you guys and like us, and also for triathletes. Jonathan Kane.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, Stuart, I mean, I just having gotten on here for the first time, but you and I have spoken a little bit about it. I can already see some of the potential training applications, and certainly, as Sid said, for the recreational athlete who just wants to get a workout in, burn a few calories, from a general health perspective, obviously there's that, and the immersive nature of it will certainly help. But the wheels turning in my head are more sort of parallel to yours in that I can see the training application. I see the ability to program. To me, it's sort of twofold. One, you can, as you said, you can say, hey, let's program the Boston Marathon. Let's train the first 13 in Boston, where if you don't train it, your legs are going to be trashed. People always think, I'll go out a little fast, I'll bank some time, which never works on any course, but certainly in Boston, yeah, it's great. You bank some time and you trash your butts before you can be ready for it. But I also see, again, just sort of scratching the surface, but I see the potential to create courses that don't or couldn't occur in nature. And so I think from a coaching point of view, from a training point of view, it allows you to do things that you couldn't otherwise do, and you're not limited. You can create a course that has a net downhill or net uphill or whatever. It's not, whereas if we go run a lap in Central Park, well, it's coming back the same elevation where you started, and you can do all sorts of things. So I think certainly from there, as I said to you before, I think certainly there's the style aspect of it and the immersive nature of it and the visuals. But I think there's definitely a substance to it that I'm already realizing there are things that could be done for for runners and triathletes. And yeah, you're right. We triathletes, we tend to be very geeky and depending on your perspective, either very geeky or very quick to adapt and try new technologies. So I can certainly see a triathlete who's training for Kona or for Earth. I mean, I've got a triathlete, runner turned triathlete, who reached out to me literally yesterday and said she's doing it. She signed up for her first triathlon. I said, "You know what that course is like?" She goes, "No, I'll find out, but I've been training in the park, so I'll be fine." And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, you're not going to be fine.
Yeah.
Now, in this case, it was more of the cycling, but it's the same thing, potentially for running. Okay, you're not going to, people talk about all the big hill in Central Park. Look up to Harriman, where there's a 3-mile climb where you're gaining 1,000 feet. You're not doing that around here. So, yeah, I think there's all sorts of potential applications.
Thanks. So, for instance, Kona, you mentioned. When you're in the bike race there, I believe you go out about 30 miles, fairly flat, gently rolling, and then a 22-mile uphill.
It's something like, honestly, you probably know better than I, but yeah, it's some ridiculous thing, and I mean,
And Sid is figuring out a way to apply this to cycling, right?
Yes, I was just mentioning that to Jonathan earlier that having created this platform, we had thought about other modalities that could be applied to it, and soon we will have a bike modality to it, a stationary bike, and then that it'll be more like a Peloton bike. But our goal is at one point to be able to roll your own bike into it. We have some ideas about that, and then the rowing machine is another thing, and each of these will have the same interactiveness that you're going to see me demonstrate in a minute, and that you're going to try yourself. So yeah, I mean, you could do that race again.
Yeah. I'm going to train on the
Oh, dear.
I'm going to train on the rowing machine this time.
Ride, roll, and run.
Never gonna live down showing up with the train. I was well warmed up. What can I tell you?
Yeah, and so yeah, that's and that's the I guess the fun part of this for me is that I have engineers downstairs, and we are constantly innovating. We're constantly learning from the people that use the product, and in the end, we hope to deliver a product that is fun, safe to use, and enhances your physical aspirations, whether it's a recreational guy like me or these two guys here that want to run each other off the road. But Stuart, do you want to
Yeah,
take it back?
Sure. So, in general, my point is I'm going to be in here available to coach people for specific races. We're going to make plans. Derek has other classes he teaches, Roseanne teaches a class. This place is going to be pretty comprehensive. We're coming in to strength work, flexibility work, yoga class, relaxation stuff, high-end workouts possible on the treadmill any time of year, like when it's 95 degrees. Elise and I had to run 95 degrees recently on the track at Riverbank Park. All jokes aside, we were completely prevented from doing what we wanted to do. We wanted to do a long workout that was possible in the morning when it was 80 degrees, but at 95 degrees, it would have killed us. I mean, we couldn't have done any kind of a workout. So we did something short, it was more fun, and had not quite the application we would have wanted to our next long race. We could have come in here and done what we wanted to do, and we did in the morning, and anything else. Pretty much anything else. How about this? You can bring in a workout that you've got on Strava, any GPS device recorded, and it can be recreated through being applied to this machine so that your run that you did, or a race, can be recreated on the treadmill. I just went yesterday, as Sid asked me to, and actually asked me what kind of courses did I think would be interesting. I thought of Van Cortlandt Park. Does anyone here run Van Cortlandt Park cross country course? This morning.
I should have said hi. I'm right there.
Yeah, no, I was there yesterday. So I took a GoPro camera and walked the entire 3.1, filmed the whole thing, and got GPS data on a nice GPS watch that is going to be marketed here, the Polar Watch, brand new, and very impressive. That's going to be brought in here now and put on the machine so that not just the computer generated visuals, but actual video of the real Vancouver Park will be what you're seeing while you're running the exact gradients of Vancouver Park. So John, the coaches there, John Adam, the coaches Vancouver, can tell me how realistic it is. Yeah. So things like that. I mean, it seems like it's going to open up. I think it feels to me like treadmills were the same for like decades. Since I was first aware of them, they went straight and flat. They raised very slowly. They went down very slowly, and that's it. And from that, we've jumped like 3 different, volumes of improvement to this. So that's what makes it exciting to me. Someone who can think. He described. He didn't say this in his little intro, but he told me, perhaps it makes it sound cocky. He said, it's sort of half and half. I think he said a humble brag. I'm not sure. This is something like, nobody told me I couldn't make this, so I did it. And I think that kind of thing is absolutely wonderful and unusual. And I've always wanted to see a treadmill go downhill. And why hasn't it happened? 50 years I've been running on the darn things, and I've never run downhill until 2 weeks ago. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. If I run Boston, I'm going to come run 13 miles downhill, I guarantee you, because I've done it, having trained that way, and I've done it without. They're 2 very different results in Boston. One of which you don't want the result of in your records, and the other you're very proud of. If you train right, you can, I always say the harder the course is, the better it is for the real devoted runner, because he or she will prepare for it. And then you'll get ahead of all the people who say, oh, I'll find out when I get there. How about you, John? Last words?
I think you touched on a lot of it, but again, going to the fact that you can get a GPX file and program it in there. We were talking earlier. I just had an athlete who raced Leadville, or the Leadville 50 miler, and he and I talked. But he lives in Colorado, so every weekend he was able to go and train on that terrain. Obviously, not all 50 at the time, but
yeah,
he was able. And we talked about how advantageous it was that he lived there, that he could do that. But yeah, now I'm saying, oh well, you know what? If I've got a flatlander who wants to go out next year and do that, they'll also be sleeping in an altitude tent. But yeah, the ability to say, hey, you know what? Let's take that file. Let's simulate those hills again. And as you said, both the up and the down hills, because so many people get. I mean, that's basically 25 up, 25 down, and so many people get trashed on the way back down. So, yeah, I mean, I know I'm sort of echoing what you said, but I think that, and also just from my quick little sampling on here, having spent a lot of hours on a lot of treadmills, the ability to go downhill is a huge advancement, and the instant change. It's not, okay, I want to go up 15%, and you hit the button 30 times to go half for every time.
Yeah.
And by the time you've finally gotten there, it's 30, 40 seconds later.
It's time to go down.
Yes. But again, as you're trying to do an interval, if you're trying to simulate hill repeats and things like that, it really is a significant difference. And I think, again, from a coaching perspective, it lets you also, I hate the term, but you can think outside the box, or you can think outside the oval. If I've got someone going to the track, of course I'm going to say, okay, we're going to do 400 meter intervals or 800 meter, or maybe if I'm really being crazy, we'll do 300s. But you're sort of that you boxed into that. That's you're sticking with the 400 meter oval. Here you could do intervals of any distance you want. You can come up with a justification for doing it. You could say, okay, we're going to do 572 meter interval, whatever you want, and you could do it at every angle, and you could do it. And as you said, you could practice for something like Fifth Avenue Mile, which isn't nearly as flat. I love when people say to me, "Oh, it's flat. I take the bus there all the time." Well, yeah, it's flat if you're taking the bus. But so hey, let's really work on that first section, which is downhill, and so you could do it's just that. As or as you said, you could do a time trial on the full course. So even just, having been introduced to this, half an hour ago, whatever, I'm already seeing some of the possibilities, and and sort of thinking along with you, and I think there's a lot of real potential there from an athlete's point of view and from a coach's point of view.
Totally agree. Can you show them what it looks like to,
Sure. Thank you both. And now for a little bit more introduction to the machine itself. Jonathan earlier asked me the reason for the booth, and I told him that again, born from the pandemic, I had a feeling that if things got rough with gyms having to shut down or reduce the number of people in it, that having a booth, I mean, the booths have their own air supply, so we filter the air, and you have an exhaust in the front, so your air is basically channeled up to the HVAC equipment in the ceiling. So the booth is, really uh, in terms of providing a safer environment, it helps. The other thing is, of course, we put the largest monitor we could find at the time. People have asked me whether we have tried with things like an Oculus Rift. And yes, we have, and we found it to be nauseating and very difficult to navigate on a treadmill. Plus the sweat factor, and if you wear glasses, forget it. It's not feasible. So within the context of making it immersive, the booth and the black panels give you a little more of a immersive nature to the scene, while still using the plexiglass. You don't feel claustrophobic, if you will. The machine itself is on two steps because it goes up to a 40-degree grade, 39 point something actually. So for that reason, we have to have clearance. But the other thing is it gives a nice polished look to the machine. The handrails, if you notice, are different than other treadmills. They go all the way to the back because it's a high performance machine. It can react pretty quickly. We've tuned it so that it is safe but reactive. But if at any time you feel that you need to hold on to it for support, that's what they're here for. They're very strong. We can also use it as another exercise element. So as I said, we have something called a jump interaction. So if you were to jump using the handrails, your avatar would register a jump. The other thing over here you see is a small compact control panel. We'll show you as you're onboarded how to use it. Very simple. You pick your scene, and thereafter, once you've picked your scene and you've started the machine, all of the other controls are done by hand gestures. I'm going to show them to you in a second. I'm going to turn away from you so you can see what I'm talking about. This is to start the machine and also to speed it up. So right hand up starts it, speeds it up. Left hand up here slows it down. This is to stop the machine. And when you're in what we call the free mode, you can actually turn your avatar by turning right or turning left. Now, when I run, you'll see that I'm not doing gross movements. These are all subtle movements. When you first get on the machine, you'll have to find your sweet spot, and it's probably takes about a minute, but you don't have to raise your hand all the way up, and you don't have to put your hand all the way out. So it's more like this, like that. And each of you are at different heights, so you're going to find your sweet spot within a couple of minutes. The really cool thing about this treadmill, which makes it what it is that it has a center pivot. So you can see there's a yellow sticker on all of them. So that's where the pivot point is. So unlike other treadmills which lift you off the ground and you actually rise closer to the ceiling, this machine actually pivots the entire board along that point. So as a result, it's very reactive, and you also don't rise or fall. So when you run on the ground, you meet the ground with your ankle, at that point, if that's a downhill, if it's an uphill. So the feeling that you'll get is similar to running outdoors rather than running on a ramp if you run at the pivot. Now, certainly you can run a little further. In fact, Jonathan, I overheard you saying that you feel that like you were running further forward, right? And that's fine. I mean, the machine is not going to be affected by where you run. However, if you run too far back, there is a safety cable that we'll be asking you to wear, and it'll pull off. So if you run, say, further back than here, the safety cable will pull out because obviously we don't want you falling off the machine. So there is a wheel over here, but you don't really need to use it unless you have a frozen shoulder and you can't put your hand up or something like that. There is a speed up and slow down wheel. So those are the main attributes of the machine. And now I'm going to demonstrate how it runs. I'm not going to wear the safety cable because I'm practiced on it, but all of you will.
But he is wearing his minimal shoes and he cannot take off.
So I'm gonna start with the track. Now within the context of each scene, we have some immersive sounds. So you'll hear a crowd or you'll hear crickets in the forest. So that's part of the immersive nature of the machine. So once the scene loads, on this control panel, you'll see a start button. And as you can see the instruction, it says press start, resume, and raise right hand to start. When you start, it will automatically go up to 1.5 miles an hour so that you get a cadence going, and then you can speed up thereafter. Now, right now, I'm on what's called guided mode. I don't have to turn. The track is already set out for me. And all I have to do is speed up or slow down.
I'm having him change that so he's not running in lane 4 all the time. He's running way too far. He's got to cut to the inside.
Sorry, I am clattering all these things in my pocket. Okay, so that's the track scene, and we have hurdles and we have other things that we are going to be implementing. So you could run hurdles. So as you come to a hurdle, you do that. That would be a jump over the hurdle. So the next place that I'm going to take you to is the often mentioned Fifth Avenue Mile. Now, like I said, when we built this, we built the entire New York City Marathon, but I didn't know about the Fifth Avenue Mile being a significant race. And like I said, I'm not a racer myself, but thanks to Stuart's acumen about what racers could benefit from this machine, I told our engineers and artists, let's recreate that. It's a fairly new map, and we still have a few visuals to deal with, but in terms of the grade, it's very accurate. And so I'm going to demonstrate that for a second. Now, in a map as long as the New York City Marathon, you can start at the very beginning or you can start in intermediate points. And these type of maps are generally best on guided mode, meaning you don't need to turn. We've already preset a path. But when we demonstrate the moon, that's a free range course where running, in any direction is possible. Now, the other thing you'll notice here is these runners. These are the pace runners, and their pace is on their bib. So they kind of flank you for the entire distance. The faster you go, the faster they go.
It's a -1 degree there.
So this course is, of course, true to. So in the control panel, we can change the angles from maximum to minimum for what the machine can do. So if you're not comfortable doing a lot of decline, because the decline, as Stuart was saying and Jonathan was saying, might throw you off balance initially. So you might want to start off with, say, a -1, but it'll go all the way up to -5 degrees angle, which is roughly about 8 or 9 degrees grade.
It's like Cat Hill.
So
You can go down as something like Cat Hill.
right, and so when it comes to Boston, and he mentioned that he'd like to see if the machine can replicate those miles of Boston. It can, and we checked it very carefully. And we haven't built Boston yet, but when we do it, this machine will be capable of replicating all of the downhills faithfully. It already does the New York City Marathon faithfully. And so those are the types of maps that we're developing specifically. And then we have the Branch Brook Park, which is another cross-country trail. What Stuart was mentioning about the video version is one that we have already implemented on a trial basis, and we're going to bring that out probably by mid-August, where he's going to have Van Cortlandt Park, for example, will be one of the first ones that we're going to feature. But in time, we also have the ability for you to have your own GPX file and something called a procedural run, which means that the scene won't be true to nature, but it will still give you a visualization that you can run with. So the last thing I want to show you guys before we onboard you, there's many other maps, but I'm sure you guys are dying to jump on it, so I'm not going to take a lot of your time. The last thing I want to show you is something that Stuart alluded to a little bit earlier, which is the multiplayer. So I'd like to welcome John. He's our lead engineer on the multiplayer front. And John, you want to jump in? So,
Go down.
John.
Heart rate monitor not connected.
So as you can see, this is a relatively new thing, but we thought, why waste the opportunity of having all of you here on a Wednesday? So again, you can do multiplayer on the track, but we're going to go to the moon. Now the moon is my favorite track. It is more like my trail run than anything else. John, you ready?
Yeah, no problem.
Now here you can also see the treadmill reacting. We have developed some games on the move. John, are you following me?
Yeah, right behind you.
Okay. Okay, catch me if you can, John. Okay, so I couldn't shake it. So, again, for all you marathoners, this is more my cup of tea. So, thank you, John. So with that, I welcome all of you to be onboarded and try the experience.
So if you'd like to use a heart rate monitor, we have heart rate monitors that you can go to the front desk and Rosie will hook you up with a heart rate monitor. So when you get onboarded, we can do your heart rate. And after you've done your experience on the treadmill, we're going to be having sushi and wine if you guys want to stick around. So we'll be bringing that up as well. So thank you again for coming. Stuart will be here teaching classes, 5-6 days a week now. So you can check our schedule. Our website is rome149.com.